What's up, guys? Today I want to talk about something that you might be experiencing in your business right now, especially because summer and the heat wave brings chaos sometimes. And a lot of times it exposes our businesses to the things that we need to improve. And when we know what we need to improve, then we can actually make changes to actually do that. So the chaos and the frustration and the irritation and the headaches, it's not something to be frowned upon and just make you mad. It's something that you should just take in as feedback. It's just feedback showing you that, hey, we need to improve these things so that we can get better. Well, one of the things that we needed to improve at one point in our business was the service call process, because what was happening is I hired a bunch of people coming into, like, towards the end of the winter, and then the winter before we went into summer, I hired a bunch of people, and some of those people didn't have time to adapt to our way of doing it. And look, I'm just going to be 100% transparent. At this time, we did not have a service call process. And if we did have the process at this time, it was not being held, like, nobody was being held accountable. So if you have a process, that's one thing, but to hold people accountable to the process, that's an entirely different subject. But we weren't running these calls because we had a bunch of new people, and each person was given 4, 5, 6 calls a day once the summer hit. And what happened was, after several months, I realized just how many callbacks we had been running, because at that time we weren't tracking them. And once I realized how many it was over this 3 or 4 month period, this busy season, we had ran over 160 callbacks. Now, during these months, we were running 300 plus calls a month. But when you start to actually monetize that, it's one of the first lessons I learned from a mentor early on in my business, is that you have to monetize things like this in your business so that you understand just how much money it's costing you. And so I just put pen to paper and I figured, okay, well, we've ran 300 calls per month for the last 4 months. That's over 1,200 calls we've ran. We had 160 callbacks, maybe more. I'm just going off of memory here, but it was 13% of all the calls we had ran. And the number that we're striving for in our business is 2% or less callbacks. So out of 100 calls that you run, you should only be going to 2 callbacks maximum. And most of the time, most businesses aren't doing that. They're doing a lot more callbacks than that out of every 100 calls. When you're by yourself, it's a lot easier to do because you're the expert, you're the professional, you've maybe have the experience behind you. But when you hire a bunch of people who don't have nearly the experience that you have, that's when this can become an issue. And it became an issue in our business. So we started looking at that, and I figured that in order for us to go run these 160 calls, and look, this wasn't, you don't get 160 callbacks overnight. This happened over a period of time. So every other day, we're running some callbacks, whether it be from the install team or some service calls. And 9 times out of 10, when we go back to these callbacks, the customer doesn't expect there to be a charge. They don't expect to be charged. And so in order to maintain our reputation, a lot of times, what do we do as business owners? We give it away for free. Not every single time, of course, but a lot of times we do. Whether that's out of guilt or shame or just because we want to maintain our reputation, a lot of times that's what we do. So imagine if you didn't get paid for 99% of these callbacks and you have 160 of them to run. If I took one technician, I just did the math on this, it would be 2 months. If the one technician ran 4 calls a day, and this is like traveling all over the region. So they're burning fuel, they're burning wage time that could be more productive if we're actually running billable calls. Think of the CSR and the dispatcher's time that it took for them to answer the call and dispatch the call and manage the call. Think of the overtime that you might be paying because we have these callbacks that we are squeezing into our schedule every day when there's really no room in our schedule to begin with, right? So we start adding all this up, but I'm just going to throw that aside. If we just threw that aside and we just sat and thought about what would it take to go run these 160 calls, I figured it up, and it would be one technician would work. He would run 4 calls a day, 21 days in a month, be for 2 whole months. 4 calls a day, 2 whole months. Mind you, traveling to each of these calls. Like, just add that up. Or I could take 2 technicians and give them each 4 calls a day, and they would run for an entire month. So 1 entire month of wages being paid for 2 technicians, including the fuel and the dispatcher cost and the overtime that I'm paying. And, I'm paying their benefits still, whether they're producing anything or not for the business, we still got benefits that we're giving them that we're paying for. So think about that. Think about how much money you might be losing in your business if callbacks are getting out of control. And normally during the busy time, like I started off telling you guys in this video, is that during that, the chaos that comes with summer and the high call volume and the demand, oftentimes it exposes us. So if you're being exposed right now for callbacks, there's several things that you can do to minimize those callbacks. Number one, I talked about earlier is, implement a process. And all processes are not created equal. Some processes produce the results you want and some don't. So if you implement the right process on the service call, then it should have a direct correlation with the amount of callbacks you get. You should see less callbacks now that you've implemented this service call process. So if that's not happening, you're probably not running the right process. Another thing that you could do is you have to hold people accountable to running the process, not to the result, not to have less callbacks necessarily. Because if they are running the process and the process works and it directly correlates to less callbacks, then it will solve itself if you just hold them accountable to running the process. So that is the first thing that I would do and I would focus on. Another thing is we have to measure this. Like, if you're not measuring this, go back right now through all of your calls on your call board, add up all the ones that were callbacks, including installation callbacks. For any reason whatsoever. I don't care if it was, somebody left a tool downstairs. That's still a callback. You still got to travel to the customer's home to go pick up your tool. So think about and add up all of your callbacks and find out where you're at really. And there's numerous other things that you can do. And I have a training that I go deep into. No callbacks is what I call the training. And we're going to be releasing those trainings next week. So just stay tuned to the YouTube channel for that. But I really want you to go back through and think about how many callbacks you're having, add them up, find out what that number is. Don't just guess. It's one thing to say, yeah, we have a lot of callbacks. It's a whole nother thing to add it up and then monetize it. Determine how much money is it really costing you to send a technician back to these calls all the time, and then not charging the customer half the time to try to maintain your reputation or not feel guilty or not feel shame, right? So think about this, go through your stuff, figure it out. You've got to stop callbacks, because oftentimes it's not that you may not need to adjust your pricing. You may not need to get better at sales. You may have those things down. I don't know, because each individual business is different. What you might need is to fix this part of your business, because all the money you save from sending technicians out to these calls, it's all going to fall to your bottom line. And now these technicians are spending more time on productive calls that actually produce income and revenue for your business versus ones that don't. So that's all I got for you guys today. Go make money. Boom. Get a handle on those callbacks. And stay tuned. I got some training for you. It's coming your way.